Once again, welcome to Canada, and thanks to our amazing hosts in Canada. You know, a year ago in Atlanta, I came and we talked about the new IDA, and I threw out a bunch of metaphors that I thought might be relevant to our work and what we're trying to create in public spaces. I talked about how we're all members of a jazz band, where it's this improvisation, where we're constantly dealing with different variables, and you're like, yeah, I kind of like that. That works. And then I said, you're all like okra. You're kind of this goop that into which all these different elements come, and we get, just like we got great music out of the jazz band, we get great meals out of creating this place where all these different elements can mix. I talked about the miracle of the mix and the miracle of the messiness. I talked about how you're all champion ping pong players at this version of ping pong, where you've got things going in every single direction. You've got to manage all these different variables, and it's a little bit crazy, but you kind of liked that too. And I said that you're all polyamorous because you're all engaged in multiple relationships and managing them very carefully in a complex environment. And you said, yeah, I kind of like that, but don't tell anyone. And then I said, you're kind of like bacteria in a Petri dish because you also are nurturing these places, whether it's a public space or our cities, or just inside your head, all these different ideas where these different things mix together within this container and potentially are the cure for polio or the cure for some big problem that we've got that we're dealing with. And all this was in the service of this notion, a Jane Jacobs notion, that what we do as placemakers and what we do as city builders and what we do in our work as IDA professionals is we're creating space for a certain amount of disorder and messiness and a mix and the miracle of the messiness, because that's where all these great things happen. Cities are messy, but that's where the energy comes from. And that was in response to an environment where some people in the UK was saying, we want to separate ourselves from the messiness of Europe. We had our own idiot saying, we want to separate ourselves and put up walls and things. But we still didn't, I didn't really think it was going to happen. So we said, just, be the outlier, be outlandish, let there be some crazy things, unpredictable things going on. But boy, this last year, it's really been a lot of storminess, not just in the U.S., everywhere you go. And, sometimes it's nature's storminess. This is just a metaphor for it. It happens everywhere. It just happened a few weeks ago, and literally in this building a few days ago, there were some people that were displaced by these fires who were forced to, put up temporary shelter in this place. We see it, the earth shakes, things happen, shit happens, and it's messy. And sometimes it's driven by natural forces, and sometimes it's driven by crazy forces. But this last year, we've had a lot of storms, and we've had a lot of hurricanes. And that's always going to happen. And there's one particular hurricane that I'm getting a little tired of. And some of them may end at some point. But the fact is, we know that things are always going to change. And sometimes it's at the national level, and then it's at the local level. And this was a session that Judith referred to yesterday. We have an open technology session on this topic. And I want to just be clear that, there's things we don't control, but this doesn't reflect any of my experience in New York City. It's really just, it's good to be prepared. Really, it's true. But, by the end of this last year, I was reading this book in August because I was like, this has been tough. And what we're dealing with are the constant challenges of our jobs personally, the challenges of our public spaces, and it's always changing and it's always new. And then I'm like, but it's okay because I'm going to Canada. And Canada is fresh and young and strong and full of hope. And Canada, which this gentleman who's leading Canada, who used to be the kid in the room, ends up being the only adult in the room these days. And so I was like, it's going to be okay. I'm going to Canada. And just like Obama said on this button that people were handing out, the world needs more Canada. And then I come here, and what happens? I cry. Day one, I come here and I cry. And it wasn't just me. I saw you crying yesterday, and I saw a bunch of you boo-hooing over there. So, thanks a lot, Canada, and thanks, Carolyn and Judith and all the organizations. Because I saw a lot of teary eyes, and we talked to people yesterday, and there was emotion and there was passion. And I thought, but it wasn't sadness that makes you want to go to this bar on 234 Main Street. Yes, it's 8 minutes away. It's called High and Lonesome. So, but we weren't crying because we were hopeless. We were crying, at least I was crying yesterday, because life is tough. There's a lot of sadness and pain. But there's also this mix of hope, and that mix of being able to see through the pain so that we don't end up high and lonesome. And being able to have hope, that's what we need to do. And also, just going to be high and lonesome, that's not a solution either. And, right next to this is around the corner from high and lonesome, it says, culture, not condos. And I know what they get, and I believe in culture, and I understand the issues about gentrification, but easy answers and simple answers usually aren't the right answers. It's not just like that. And what we need is that mixture of reality in the face of our challenges and our sadness, but also the strength and the hope to move forward. So how do we disrupt this momentum of despair, which is what Vanessa talked about yesterday? A few metaphors. First of all, we got to keep our eye on the light and the things that nurtures us and energizes us, that feeds our passion. I'm a sailor. One of the things that happens in sailing, you set the course, but you know what? The wind changes, the current changes, you got to change course to get where you eventually want to go. It's accepted, and we accept that, but I don't know if we always internalize the uncertainty of our lives and our world and our environments. And one of the things that we're doing is we're navigating, but it's not always in a straight line. God knows that. But so yesterday, Paul Jordan talked about we seek the natural root of the place, the natural strength. What is there that we don't always notice, that we want to nurture, that powers us? Jeffrey Robinson talking about a way in which we do that is we seek out the social entrepreneurs, the people with passion in our neighborhood, the people like Vanessa, and we say, that's always been there. Remember she said, the person said to her, and you've been here this whole time. That place has been there. We are in the business of finding the people and the things that are great, that are our sources of energy, that have been there the whole time. And then what do? We get from the no to the yes. We look for the people who are wanting to hear a yes, and then we just keep on asking and asking and asking. One of the ways we do that, as Vanessa said, is through the creative, transformative power of goodwill and the power of love, rather than hatred. And it seems like there's a lot of hatred going on in the world, but there's a power in love, and we heard it yesterday. This is a Valentine's exhibit we did in Times Square that was trying to shed love on the thousands and millions of people who live in New York City who were born elsewhere. And that is, again, what are the sources of power and strength that we have that are there that may not be seen because people don't want them to be seen? Another metaphor, open source software. There's a way you can do things where it's like there's a single source and then that's what it is, or we can open it up to everybody. I'm looking for metaphors about how we tell our stories, about what we do, and about our cities and our places. We have an open space technology session. We had a first one this morning. I want more of them. How do we tell our stories? Come to me with ideas about metaphors. But also what we do when we do it right, when we're talking to each other, is that we learn from each other. 10 years ago, IDA, there was one keynote speaker on high that was going to tell us what to do. Now we have a variety of master talks. David talked about the many different conferences, ELF sessions, different things that we do, and these open space technology sessions where we talk to each other and we have thousands of sources of ideas rather than a single source of idea. And what we do is when we get two ideas that match up, then just like with the sharing economy, everybody ends up profiting from that. Jane Jacobs talked about we need to get away from the big ideas, but start on the ground. Just look at the ordinary scenes at events. Talk to each other about the ordinary things that happen in our ordinary places, and then begin to develop a theory and recognize that each place is different. An example of this, staying close to the ground, that's what Apple did. They said the technology may be complicated, but we are going to focus on the user experience. And we as place managers in the broad sense or in the narrow sense are always focused on the user experience. And if we stay rooted in that, then we don't get stuck in the fights about dogma. We take on the problem that needs to be solved. The other metaphor here is, as my director of operations, Tom Harris, always says, when I'm making the perfect the enemy of the good. He says, if Steve Jobs had waited for like the perfect iPhone, we never would have gotten the first one. So here are my iPhones over the years. Look how cute that first one is. And the first one came out, and it had bugs. And there was a 1.0 version, and the software had bugs. Our life is about dealing with those bugs. And that 1.0, 2.0, and you know what? It's going to come out, and it's going to be imperfect, but there's going to be a new version of it, and it's going to change, especially if we tap into the wisdom of all the people around us. But there is a point at which we just got to make some decisions. You got to move from wishing for the perfect versus the enemy of the good. You got to go from wishing to just having the backbone to make a decision. So Vanessa said, sometimes you got to make a decision, and we become the they. We can't count on them to solve. They got to solve this problem. No, we end up solving the problem. Or in the words of our chair-elect last night, Tammy Dorr, we at IDA just fix shit. Sorry, Tammy, but it was a good line. So this is true of cities, but it's also true of us. Vital cities and all of us have marvelous innate abilities for understanding, communicating, contriving, and inventing what is required to combat their difficulties. We tap into all of the wisdom in our communities and in this place and in this room. We break a few rules. We step into the street. We cross where we're not supposed to cross. And from individual actions, we create a greater and more coherent whole. Thank you.